We're going to talk a little bit about Camera RAW and why it's important that we use Camera RAW and how it differs from other image formats like JPEG. So first we're going to take a look at a digital SLR camera. When we're talking about Camera RAW, we're talking about the raw image data that is taken in by the sensor when the shutter fires in the camera. So the sensor, little red mark over there on the left hand side of the diagram here, is capturing all that light and that's coming through the lens. So when the light hits that image sensor, it's capturing the image and it is taking in all of that data and transferring it to the memory card. If you are setting your camera to actually keep the raw file, it's actually going to be an unprocessed file, and it's not going to mess with that information at all. If we look JPEG files, when the raw data from this camera sensor is converted to a JPEG, it is processed, and the camera, depending on what kind of camera you have, will do some things like white balance and other compression things to kind of reduce file size, and it does some other things that will change the quality of your image before it transfers it to the memory card. You'll notice in the diagram here, if we keep it in a RAW format, the RAW format goes to the memory card, it's untouched. If we have a JPEG format, it's actually going to be altered quite a bit before it gets transferred to the memory card, and we lose a lot of data and a lot of other things in that processing and in that compression to get from the raw data down to the JPEG. So just something to keep in mind there. A RAW file is also referred to as a digital negative. It's the original. It is the actual data that the camera captured. With this analogy, you can kind of think of a JPEG as a copy of a print. If you take a copy of a copy of a copy, it's not going to be as good of quality. And every time you save a JPEG, it's going to have some type of compression. It's going to have some type of processing being done to it, and you're losing the control and the information that was in the original image when you're using JPEG. All right, so a couple of positive things for Camera RAW that you will need to remember. The first one is that it's an unprocessed format. It's untouched. So what the camera captures is what you're going to get to work with, and it's going to be the most the highest quality image that you can possibly get from directly from the camera. Editing files in Camera RAW is a non-destructive editing workflow, and what that means is when you edit RAW files, you are not changing any of the information that's from the original file. You are kind of adding adjustments on top of it. Okay, so you're not actually changing the original information. Next, you can drastically correct over or under exposure because of the additional data available. Because you have every bit of data from that sensor, you can actually, if an image is underexposed or overexposed, you can correct that with a lot more flexibility than you can in a JPEG image that's already processed. Also, you're going to start to see some things in RAW files like more colors. You're going to get better prints. Again, a lot more control over how you want the image to look, and the tools that are available is going to be a much wider variety as well. If you think about it, JPEGs are only being processed by whatever processor is inside just your little camera body. When we're doing RAW files, you're actually getting an entire software program like Photoshop, Camera RAW, that is actually processing your images for you, and you have all of that control. So you can kind of let the camera body do it automatically, or you can have all the control of all the tools inside of Photoshop. That's the difference. There are just a couple drawbacks for Camera RAW, so we'll point those out. These will be important to kind of remember as well. Because there is more information and the RAW files are not processed like the JPEGs, the file size is higher. Okay, so RAW files are going to take up a lot more space. It's going to fill up your memory cards a lot faster. Memory cards aren't as expensive as they used to be, so it's not as big of a deal now. However, it will take up a considerable amount of space compared to the JPEG. Another thing is that you have to process the images, okay? So on one hand, it's kind of good that you are making the decisions as to how the image is going to be processed. At the same time, when you have a ton of images you have to do, it can take a long time to actually do it properly. The other thing is the RAW files usually come in a proprietary formatting by the manufacturer. So Nikon has their own type of RAW file. You'll notice them as .nef files, which we'll see here in the next video. In the end, the best part about the RAW workflow is that it gives you the greatest control, gives you the greatest quality images, and you are able to decide how the image looks